You're locked into the Liberty Flames podcast, powered by Rogers Heating and Cooling, servicing Greater Lynchburg's HVAC and electrical needs. Schedule your service today at callrogers.com. Get ready for double coverage with Nick Pierce and Pat Kelly, the weekly podcast that takes you inside Flames football and around the nation before game day. Now, alongside former Flames All-Conference wide receiver Pat Kelly, here's your host, Nick Pierce.
Flames are 1-0, and it's time to open up conference play. Hello and welcome into Double Coverage here on the Liberty Flames podcast, powered by Rogers Heating and Cooling. I'm Nick Pierce. He's Pat Kelly, the former All-Conference wide receiver. Glad to have you along for the ride again here today. Week 2 of the college football season is here, and again, the Flames will open up conference play this weekend. Headed out on the road as Liberty goes to Jacksonville State. These are the last 2 Conference USA champions. Jax State winning it all last year, Liberty 2 years ago. So big ball game coming up here this weekend, a lot at stake even this early in the season. But always good to be coming off a victory. The Flames checked that box here this past Saturday. Liberty over Maine by the final of 28-7. We'll chop that up for you, as well as get to some of your questions and thoughts from social media, a look ahead to this weekend, and so much more coming up here. Again, our show is powered by Rogers Heating and Cooling, proud supporter of Flames Athletics and the Liberty Flames podcast, servicing Greater Lynchburg's HVAC and electrical needs. Schedule your service today at callrogers.com. Pat, how you feeling, man? We got week 1 in the books. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna start this off asking you not a Liberty football question, but a football question. Who was more overhyped coming into this season? Bill Belichick and his North Carolina debut, or Arch Manning taking over the reins at Texas?
Oh, gosh. I think it is undoubtedly Arch Manning was more overhyped because, number one, he comes in as a top 2 or 3 Heisman candidate, had all the hype. He's got the name behind him, sure.
I thought they were going to stop the game at halftime and give him the Heisman. I mean, the way that this thing was built up coming in.
They, on the Bill Belichick front, I mean, I don't want to say he was overhyped because I almost feel like he was not excommunicated from the NFL, but didn't have a whole lot of interest. I think, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I think Jordan Hudson, his, 24-year-old girlfriend, she got more hype than anything. But yeah, I think Arch Manning, he struggled against a really good Ohio State defense, but you kind of expect that being kind of your first time under the bright lights. So I think Arch Manning's probably a little bit overhyped, but I would tell people, similar to how Liberty started this past week, pump the brakes, give it some time. It's game number 1 against probably the top 2 or 3 defense in the country. So I think he'll do okay, but he definitely was hyped up all off season.
The funny thing is there's still more age gap between Bill Belichick and Jordan Hudson than there was on the final score last night, 48-14.
I did see at one point when it was 41-7, they were like, oddly enough, that is the age gap between the two. And I'm not going to age shame. It just wouldn't necessarily be my cup of tea.
Correct. Exactly. But no, we're all having a little fun here. But I think you're right. I think anyone that really follows college football, and those even in and around the university, just a few people I've talked to, I think all kind of knew that this could happen with that many new players. Bill Belichick coming onto the college scene, been out of coaching for a little while now. Arch Manning, on the other hand, I think everybody had him pegged. And look, he might still end up being the guy up there, or out there in Texas, I should say. But 17 of 30, 170 yards and a touchdown against a very tough, as you said, Ohio State defense. But we just need to slow down a little bit. Sometimes I think we get a little too overamped in the preseason. Those July, August, beginning of even June. It's a year-round cycle now. Everybody wants to talk about everything and make everything into this big deal. But as you said, pump the brakes a little bit.
I think what I would say is on both fronts, both from UNC and Texas, it's going to take time, right? So for UNC, new coaching staff, new roster. It's going to take time to kind of develop that out. Similarly for Texas, it's going to take Arch time under center, or in his case, a lot in the gun, to get used to, being under those lights. So on both fronts, it's going to take a little bit of time to get where they want to go.
If we got time later, we'll come back to some of the national scene and the conference scene a little bit, but want to dive in here to Flames football. That's what we're here for today. Liberty and Jacksonville State kicking off at 12 noon this Saturday. It's 11 a.m. local time down in Jacksonville, Alabama. And you know how it's been so beautiful here over the last couple of weeks. We're getting that false fall, the fake fall, that everyone always falls for every year.
Pumpkin spice latte yet or not? No.
No, I'm not a pumpkin spice fan, first of all. But the high on Saturday in Jacksonville, 88 degrees. And I guarantee you it's going to feel a little bit hotter than that down there on that turf field and that concrete stadium at Burgess Snow Field at Amherst Stadium now, as they've named it since the last time we were there. 22,500 is what it holds. I highly doubt it will be that at capacity. Although, fun fact, record attendance at Jacksonville State for a football game was when Liberty was there in 2017. They had almost 24,000 there, so they were over capacity for that game. So, potential for a good crowd. Should be a good crowd, although it's an early kick. That's why I'm a little hesitant to say that it's going to be a hostile environment. But the conditions could be hostile, and it will be important for the Flames to be able to prepare for that and adjust to that coming up here this weekend.
Yeah, I'm having PTSD, flashbacks from when I was playing a couple trips to Conway, South Carolina to play Coastal. Man, that beach, southern weather. Yes, I'm from New Orleans, but I have aged out of that. I've been up here for so long now that I forgot just how hot it was.
Didn't you play your best game at Coastal Carolina? At least you had your most catches anyway. I don't know if it was your best game.
So fun fact, I'll tell on myself here. That game, I actually started off, I dropped a hitch that popped up in the air and they took it back 65 yards for a touchdown. But let's not dwell on the negative there. I did have a good game that day. The offensive game plan was baked around a lot of quick games, so I benefited very much from that. Unfortunately, we did not come away with a win there, but it wasn't hot that game. A couple years before that, we're playing, and it was in the 80s, just super swampy, super humid. We don't need to relive that. I do not miss that at all.
It's going to be interesting this Saturday. If you've never been to Jacksonville State, they've done some work on the stadium since the last time we were there in 2023. Flames got out of there with a win that year. That was part of the 13-1 season. Since then, they've built a new football operations center. They've expanded their suites. Interesting story. They actually got the funding to do a lot of the stuff with the stadium because they have dormitories that are built into the structure of the football stadium itself. Kind of cool if you're a student that loves sports. I'd want to get my dorm at the football stadium, sure. But it is absolutely horrible for the visiting team. The visiting sideline is like walking a tightrope. I will be moving through the Flames huddles this weekend to get around. And also the stands are right on top of you. Literally, fans can, I don't know if they've changed anything since the last time we were there, but fans can literally lean over the railing and almost listen in to Liberty's huddles on the sideline. That is way too close. Hopefully, they'll get that rectified down there, or they already have since the last time we were there. Locker rooms kind of small. Just a lot of things that you have to deal with going on the road. There'll be some adversity apart from the game itself that the Flames are going to have to overcome here this weekend. Does that remind you of anywhere you went? That's not a setup question. I'm legitimately asking. Do you remember anywhere like that was super uncomfortable to be at?
Back in the day, Charleston Southern was not ideal. And then your walk from your locker room to the field was 300 yards. It was quite a hike.
Remember that.
That was a tough one. Montana, you mentioned the stadium being, the fans right up on top of you. That was a tough one. And then my first ever collegiate game, keep in mind, I went from LCA, small private Christian high school. My first game was against West Virginia. And this isn't about the stadium necessarily, but the drive in. We're driving in on our team bus and you're looking out at all the tailgates and, you see the smoke billowing from people eating their food and all that. And then as we're getting off the bus, you see these nice, cute little kids that are double middle fingers, shouting expletives. And I'm like, this kid's 6 years old. They did it differently at West Virginia. So that was a particularly hostile trip to Morgantown, West Virginia.
Wow. I didn't make that trip up there. I remember going on the second one when the last time the Flames played up there, it might have been 2016 when Liberty was there. And actually, I had the opposite experience. The fans were super nice to me, helped me find the way down to the field. I don't know. Maybe they didn't see me as a threat.
Well, Nick, those kids have since grown up and matured, so you got the older version of those kids.
Yeah, maybe so. But no. So it'll be it'll be challenging here for the Flames this weekend. We'll get into some of the particulars of that game coming up. Jacksonville State 0-1, a 17-10 loss to UCF on the road last weekend. Oh, and by the way, Jax State has had a little bit of extra time to prepare for Liberty because, well and behold, they played on Thursday in week 1, so they've got a couple of extra days, plus they're playing at home. Liberty, on the other hand, has the short week with travel coming off the Saturday game. So another thing there that the Flames will have to overcome. But looking back to this past Saturday, Liberty starts the season with a win, 1-0. Takeaways from the game. I mean, the Flames got off to a slow start offensively, 28-7 win. It looked a little bit better towards the end when the Flames offense got going there in the second half, particularly the fourth quarter. Definitely a slow start on offense. I loved the defensive play. Love the fact that the Flames only had 4 penalties, did not turn the ball over and compound things, because sometimes when your offense isn't operating at 100% efficiency, the worst thing you can do is start to turn the ball over. Again, not to bring up North Carolina again, but look back to last night. 3 turnovers on top of the fact they couldn't move the ball after the first drive. So Liberty didn't do any of that stuff. They didn't do anything to beat themselves particularly, and I think they were able to kind of weather some of that and get through it and get things going in the right direction late. But what were some of your takeaways?
I was proud of how the team kind of overcame a slow or a rocky start. I think you saw a little bit of jitters from Vasco early on, totally normal, despite the fact that, he's played a lot of games. First game of the season, under the lights, you've just been deemed as QB1. So I think you saw a little bit of jitters there. I was proud with how they kind of responded. I was really pleased with the first drive, the third down efficiency. They had gone 4 for 4. They get inside the 15-yard line, unfortunately have the 15-yard offensive pass interference call. So they ended up going 4 for 5 on third downs that drive. The missed kick's a little bit of a bummer because we heard, just how well special teams had been all offseason and all summer camp. It's fixable. I was really proud of the defense. But one of the things Coach Chadwell said after the game, you got to hit on your assignments, right? And you saw 4 chunk plays in the game for 143 yards. You got to get those cleaned up because it sometimes only takes 1 or 2 of those to get you beat. And so I'm sure they're going to be working on that this week. So proud of how they kind of adjusted. But other than that, my big takeaway was that secondary is going to be a lot of fun to watch this year. I mean, they've got some dogs out there. And so I think they can really be locked down.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the secondary here in just a bit. I'll start on the offensive side, though, because that's what the focal point was coming into this game, was the quarterback. How is Ethan Vasco going to play? Before we get into that, though, just an update from the quarterback spot. We reported on Saturday that Ryan Berger was not dressed to play, and we found out after the game, and then more specifically on Tuesday this week, why. Berger he has been in Coach's quote, was medically disqualified to compete. More or less, he's going to have to retire. Ryan Berger with another head injury. He has a history of concussions, suffered it late last week in practice. Very unfortunate for him. His career will come to an end after just 7 games. But that's serious stuff. I mean, you can't mess around with that, with head injuries, concussions. We know how serious that can be. You're talking about quality of life. You're talking about being able to hold your kids one day. Those are all things that I'm sure were talked about. So Berger will not play anymore, but he does join the Flames coaching staff. So at least that part, I hate it that he can't go out on his own terms as far as being a player, but at least he gets to stay around the game. And I never played any sport really competitively, so I can't relate to that, but I can relate in a way of I wasn't good enough to play sports. I loved them, but I wasn't good enough. I found another way to stay around it, and I'm thankful that I was able to do that. I'm thankful for Ryan that he was also able to find another way, as Coach Chadwell kind of talked him up in his ability to kind of break down coverages and things. I'm thankful he gets to find another way to stay around the sport he loves.
Yeah, good for him to be able to do that, and then good for the Flames because you're getting essentially an extra borderline QB1 that is going to be able to help the younger guys in practice, help Vasco, in mid-game type stuff. So you've got an extra set of eyes that you wouldn't have otherwise had. So happy for him from the perspective of taking care of himself, and then good for the Flames because now you get an extra brain, an extra set of eyes into that quarterback room.
That said, Michael Merdinger moves up into the number 2 spot. He's the backup now. And, we talked about experience coming into this season. I mean, you're one play away now from potentially having Michael Merdinger be your quarterback and a guy who's only played in one collegiate game. So, just looking at the worst case scenario there, although we talked about it in preseason, Mike flashed a lot in some of those scrimmages. He's got some arm talent, and Coach Chadwell said they can win games with him. So, but certainly hoping that things continue to go well for Ethan Vasco. And look, they got off to a slow start. I mean, we talked about it, a lengthy drive to start the game last week. I was pleased with that, but it's always disappointing when you don't come away with points. And, the Flames only had 4 penalties in that game, but one of them was a key penalty, an offensive pass interference that stalled that drive, pushed them back out of the red zone, I think, and then ended up with the field goal try that obviously Jay Billingsley missed from 37 yards. So after that, it was just kind of in this, kind of static purgatory, place for the offense at that point. Then the defense gets the turnover right before halftime, and I think that was critical because at that point, Ethan Vasco was 8 of 16 passing. He finished the game 11 for 19 from that point on.
The whole game, I think, swung on that. Like I mentioned with chunk plays, sometimes all it takes on your own side of things is one big time play. The switch kind of flicks. I was glad to see them kind of step up. And you're right. It seemed like the whole offense kind of turned it on from there. I think first half, the offense had 68 rushing yards. They really weren't clicking like we're used to seeing. I think they finished close to 200 in the game. So they started to figure some things out. But yeah, I don't want to say they were sloppy early on, just not fully executed. So it was good. You get the turnover, you get points going into half, and then you start playing a little bit more like the team that you think you are and hope you're going to be this season. In a really strong finish, 21 points in the fourth quarter. That's probably what I would, reflecting back to your question earlier, what did I like? That's probably what I'm most impressed with is just the ability to finish. You got to step on throats when you get the opportunity. And I think they did that.
Vasco for the game, 19 of 33, 197 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. Hit Reese Smith in the corner of the end zone for the first one there right before halftime to tie the game at 7. Flames were down 7-0 at that point. They were in danger of getting shut out in the first half. And also, by the way, our thoughts and prayers go out to that band member that was absolutely truck-sticked by Reese Smith in the game. I think they're okay, so we can kind of chuckle about it now. Reese did say that he was able to reach out to that band member, I think their parent or father or something on social media. Just an unfortunate deal there because that poor person, they had nowhere to go.
Unsuspecting, doing their job. They're just doing what they're told to do, and wham, massive hit. Hey, but at least the output of the play was a touchdown for the Flames.
Yes, exactly. And I think everybody came away okay, no worse for wear. Surprised that the Flames threw it 33 times in that game. We talked about that beforehand. For Vasco to go 19 of 33. Now, they still ran the ball 40 times, maybe just a product of how many plays they ran.
I am a little bit surprised. And granted, we're still figuring out who this team is. They don't completely know who they want to be yet. But if the past is any indicator of the future, this is a team that likes to run the ball 60 to 65% of the time. Having run the ball only 40 plays, that's about 54%, so lower than they typically would. On the flip side, again, it's your first game. You're trying to figure some things out. You're playing Maine, so you're not going to go your full playbook, right? So I am a little bit surprised, but at the same time, part of that is also because they weren't super effective in the run. And so you're going to a little bit of quick game, which is honestly an extension of the run game, throwing some of those screens, throwing some quick game, some of those kind of surefire completions. But yeah, this Liberty team has only thrown 33 passes or more 3 times since 2022. So for them to have done it in the first game of the season, you kind of tilt your head a little bit and you're like, wasn't necessarily expecting that one. I would expect that number is going to come down. But again, as a former receiver and with the embarrassment of riches that they have in this receiver room, I'd love for them to throw it 33 times a game. I'd be all about that.
Sure, if they can do it efficiently, right, and spread the ball around. Only 1 drop from this past game as well. It's kind of an intermediate throw, and that's, you talk about the passing depth. You break down Vasco a little bit more. We talked about drops he dealt with last year at Coastal Carolina. We talked about his ability to push the ball down the field. Flames didn't really have a lot of success on pushing the ball and taking the top off here this past weekend, over 6 on any throws past 20 yards, but that means he was 19 of 27 on everything else inside of 20 yards, and that's kind of, Pat, what you and I said that we kind of expected him to be.
Yeah, you've got to be efficient in that, basically throws at or behind the line of scrimmage, those have to be 100% completions, really. And then up to that 10-yard point, I mean, you want to be sitting somewhere between 70-80%. But that is one area, Nick, that we talked about kind of throughout the offseason where he could improve is in that intermediate passing game. And so want to see him continue to chip away at that. Missed some throws there early, but like you said, kind of turned it on as the game went on. I thought he really improved from quarters 1, 2, 3, and 4. But yeah, I would expect this offense probably going to quick at the line of scrimmage, at or behind the line of scrimmage. And then as this run game gets effective, though, I think that's going to start to open up some of those downfield shots to a lot of these talented receivers that can just blow the top off.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and that's what experience does for you too. Is a guy doesn't panic, he doesn't let the first quarter beat him in the fourth quarter. He just kind of got better as the game went on, and then had a connection with Reese Smith there too. 6 catches for him. Mentioned the touchdown grab toward the end of the first half, that was big. And I think those two kind of have something going on there, and Ethan talked about it. Vasco after the game on Saturday said that Reese Smith just has a knack for finding open holes in coverage and just getting open and making catches. So, we didn't see much out of the tight ends here this past week. Jacob Jenkins, limited number of snaps. Didn't really see them get involved in the passing game at all. Might have had him use them more in pass blocking. We'll get into that in a minute. But I think Reese Smith kind of became, you and I were talking about this before we came on, that security blanket, that sure thing for Vasco there in the passing game. But one area that this team's got to get better going into Saturday is the offensive line, and that was a little surprising. They didn't play that well, and some of the veterans specifically. When you look at the PFF, some of the grades that were given there, and again, PFF and the way that Liberty grades its offensive linemen could vary a little bit. The PFF grades were not very good, and it's for your experienced guys, your Aaron Fenimores, your Jack Tuckers, your Harrison Hayes. Hayes has started before; he's more of a role this year. And then, ironically, the guys who haven't played as much or haven't been around, Trey Badowski probably had the best day overall from a PFF standpoint. DJ Geth, pretty decent as well. Jupe Engberg's actually played pretty well coming in off the bench. They've rotated a few guys. He had the best pass blocker stats of the day. He was like at 83-3 on PFF. Played 33 snaps. So, offensive line's got to get a little bit better. The run game, they need to figure some things out there still. Although Caden Williams was named the Conference USA Player of the Week, or Freshman of the Week, I should say. 52 rushing yards on 9 carries. But it was funny, Jamie Chadwell said Tuesday, well, that might have been the worst thing that could have happened because he said, we need more out of Caden Williams. He didn't think that maybe he ran as hard as they need him to run. And so just, I don't know, kind of a lot to unpack there with the O-line and the running game. What were some of your takeaways there?
Yeah, I think it's kind of expected, Nick. It's a unit that's working together when the bullets are flying kind of for the first time. So I would tell Flame fans, don't necessarily raise the red flag yet. You don't have to be super alarmed. A lot of times you hear people make tremendous improvement from year 1 to year 2. I think the same thing in a football season from week 1 to week 2. You now have game action. You've got something that you can go in, you can watch the film, and you can coach it up and say, hey, you missed here. Here's your mental mistake. Here's where you guys didn't pass a guy off. You didn't have your guy at your hip. I think they're going to be able to go in, look at the film and say, hey, these handful of plays, 5, 6, 7, whatever number that might be, here's where we need to improve. And they're going to coach the heck out of it. So I would expect to see improved communication and execution from the offensive line from week 1 to week 2. And I think you're going to need it because this is a really athletic and a really good Jacksonville State defense. They were good at getting into the backfield last week against UCF. So they've got stuff to coach up, and they're going to need to do that to have some success on Saturday.
You bring me to my next point. Jacksonville State, although 0-1, they held their own with a Big 12 team on the road at UCF, falling 17-10 last Thursday. And to your point on the defensive side, they had 14 total pressures of the quarterback, came away with 3 sacks. They hit him 4 times, 7 hurries, and then they had a lot of guys that really flashed out there. Aiden Thompson, Larry Preston at the linebacker and the cornerback spot, respectively. Their corners played pretty well this past weekend. And I thought they did enough probably to win the game. I mean, you hold a team like that to 17 points at home, just couldn't get anything going offensively. And, we'll kind of flip the script here to the other side now, Liberty's defense against Jacksonville State's offense. And, I was really impressed with what Liberty did this past weekend on defense. They played 7 guys along the defensive line plus 3 different jokers. Came away with 3 sacks. C.J. Bazell, Brenton Williams from the joker spot getting in there. They had 13 hurries as well. And then they were doing some different things. I saw at one point you had Bazell and Williams on the field at the same time, sending some pressure there off the edge. I don't remember how much we've seen of that before. Maybe I'm just not remembering it, but they broke out some different looks here this past weekend, I thought.
And I know Coach McGee had mentioned, those are 2 of their best 11 athletes on the defensive side of the ball. So I would love to see both of them out there more. Get your best athletes out there on the field, and good things are going to happen. So I'm really intrigued to see how they keep evolving utilization or use of these guys moving forward. And again, talking about this Jacksonville State team in general, very athletic, loves to run the ball. You're going to need to have some athletes out there. You're going to need to have guys that are disciplined. So I'm intrigued to see this matchup on Saturday. I think it's going to be a fun one to watch. It's 2 teams that I think like to do the same thing. They like to run the ball, and they don't necessarily love to come out and sling it, although both teams threw the ball 30 times last game. So will be interesting to see kind of how this identity of the offense and defense for Liberty continues to take shape.
Coverage was really good for the Flames this past weekend as well. Mo Williams had an interception. 7 targets thrown his way, only gave up 2 catches. Damon Harmon in coverage had 3 targets his way. Nobody caught a ball against him. So you love seeing that from your corners. Harmon was also involved in some of that pressure. I think he had a half a sack as well. So, look, you're facing a Jacksonville State team that's under a new head coach, Charles Kelly. He's got quite a lineage, by the way. He was at Auburn last year. He's an Auburn grad. He was with Hugh Freeze there as the co-defensive coordinator and safeties coach. 2023, he was the defensive coordinator and safeties coach at Colorado with Coach Prime. Before that, he spent 3 years at Alabama with Nick Saban. He was at Tennessee for a year with Jeremy Pruitt. And then you go back to Georgia Tech days, he was there with Paul Johnson. So he's learned from some of the best in the game. Speaking of Charles Kelly, 5 years as an assistant at Jacksonville State back in the 90s as well, so he returns. Clint Trickett's the offensive coordinator, was at Georgia Southern last year, Marshall before that. And then Brian Williams, their defensive coordinator, comes over after spending the last 6 years at Maryland, the last 3 as a defensive coordinator. He was not fired. He left on his own accord, as best I can tell. So that's an interesting coaching staff. Obviously, it's a little different looking than what Rich Rodriguez had there. They don't run nearly the same tempo on the offensive side. The quarterback is Gavin Wimsett, 5th-year guy from Kentucky. He transferred from UK, actually, 8 games last year. Only 41% completion percentage. That's very alarming. 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Better runner probably than a thrower, 183 rushing yards with a couple of touchdowns last year. He spent 3 years at Rutgers before that. So his best year was 2023 with the Scarlet Knights. He had 1,700 yards passing. Still only 48%, though, 9 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. This guy's a former 4-star quarterback, Pat. What do you make of him when you look at the college numbers, and what do you make of Liberty's probable game plan here this weekend?
I don't mean to slight him, but, given those numbers, it's a guy that is an athlete, and it's like, you know what? We want the ball in our athletes' hands, just not the most effective or efficient passer. And I think Jacksonville State can maybe get away with that given their propensity to run the ball and want to lean on guys that are running the ball. I think last week they had 7 or 8 guys with a carry. So they clearly have weapons that they can get the ball to and want to get in space, kind of passing when they need to. I think Liberty's game plan is probably similar to what a lot of teams have to do to Liberty. Put guys in the box, basically force your hand to throw the ball. And if that's the case, I like Liberty's chances. We saw how good they were in coverage this past week. You just mentioned all those numbers between some of the freaks in the secondary. I think Liberty's game plan is, obviously don't let them get the run game going and make a guy who's a career kind of underachiever as a thrower go out there and beat you.
Yeah, I would agree. We didn't talk about this before we came on, but your bold predictions, your bold stats. I don't know if you've got one. I'll give you a second to come up with something maybe. But my bold stat here this weekend, I think the Flames are getting 5 sacks. I think they're going to come after him. I think they are going to dare him with those lockdown corners out there on the edge. They do return 2 of their top 3 receivers from last year, but I think they're going to dare Jacksonville State to throw the ball down the field. They're, like you said, going to load the box, and they're coming after him every chance they get.
I'll give you two. From a defensive perspective, I think this secondary and or linebacking unit we'll get them involved as well. I think they come away with two picks. I agree. Liberty's going to force guys in the box. I think Liberty has proven they've got some dogs in the secondary. So I think that secondary or linebacking group comes up with two picks. From an offensive perspective, I think things are going to start to click a little bit better for the run game. I think you're going to see improvement from the offensive line. I'm going to say Dickens goes for over 100 yards. I'm high on him this year. I was high on him last week, the birthday
100
boy.
total yards or rushing yards? Because
Rushing
he can do
yards.
both. We saw him in the receiving game there. He had a lot of yaks on that touchdown.
I think he gets more touches this week, and I think he goes over 100 rushing. So
I could see
those are
that.
my
And then, too, with the injury to Von Blue, I mean, he's expected to play. He banged up his ankle in the second half. They do expect him to play this week, but how much?
yeah, you can't. I mean, going out there with a bum wheel is never necessarily a recipe for success. Fortunately, Liberty's got the stable of backs. I would expect, somewhere in the 10 to 12. And granted, I haven't been to practice yet, so this is me completely speculating. But I would expect a 10 to 12 touch kind of weekend for Dickens. They got him the ball last week and he proved to be effective. So what do you do when guys produce? You get him the ball more. So I think he could have a good game on Saturday.
Yeah, going back to the defense for the Flames, they're going to have to contend with guys like Brock Rechsteiner on the offensive side. If that
What a
name sounds
name.
familiar, if it sounds familiar, it should. I know you watched a little wrestling back in the day. I watched copious, disgustingly large amounts of wrestling when I was a child. Brock Rechsteiner is the son of Rick Steiner, one half of the former World Tag Team Champion Steiner brothers, and his brother, Brock's brother, is Braun Breaker, current WWE superstar, former Intercontinental Champion. Very cool ties there. And then obviously by default, Brock's uncle is Scott Steiner, who was the other half of the World Tag Team Champion Steiner brothers back in the day. What do you remember about the Steiner brothers and the dog-faced gremlin, Pat?
I'll tell you this, they had some of the most beautiful looking biceps I have ever seen on planet Earth. Okay. I dreamed of those things and could only wish that I had those. But yeah, I was also a pretty big wrestling nerd growing up, watching with my dad.
Yeah, very cool. And then Braun Breaker actually played at Kennesaw State as well. So not the first time the Flames have gone up against one of the Steiner boys. So we'll see how much he's involved. He was actually involved in the run game this past weekend as well. Speaking of Rex Steiner, in that game against UCF, I think he was their second leading rusher in that game, or one of their not rusher, excuse me, passing. Yeah, they did give him a carry, but passing, receiving, he was their second leading receiver. I'll get it right in a minute. 3 catches for 34 yards on 6 targets. So, Cam Cook ran the ball 75 yards this past weekend. Again, I think the Flames going to try to take that away, load up, and see what they can do as far as making Wimsatt beat them in the passing game. But I think the defense has got to set the tone for this one coming up here this weekend. Don't let Jax State get out to an early lead and, try to get things done there from the defensive side and let that offense get cooking.
This one has the makings of like a 21-17, a 24-20 type of a game. I think the over-under is something like 53, 54. I think it's two teams that at least early in the season are going to have to really rely on their defenses. And fortunately, in Liberty's case, I think they've got the dogs to do it. So I think it's going to be a lower scoring affair. But we're going to find out. It's going to be an early season heavyweight matchup. I'm high on Jacksonville State this year.
Well, we're running out of time here on the show this week. We'll try to do better next week. Get to some of your questions from the mailbag. We did not have time to do that today. We'll answer them on Twitter. You can always hit us up on X, formerly known as Twitter. Find us there. Hit the follow button. Subscribe to the Liberty Flames podcast, powered by Rogers Heating and Cooling, if you've not already done so. Get our shows downloaded directly to you each week. And also, you can now find us on YouTube as well, the Liberty Flames Athletics YouTube page. Subscribe there, and our shows will be there as well for you each week. But again, the Liberty Flames podcast, powered by Rogers Heating and Cooling, servicing Greater Lynchburg's HVAC and electrical needs. Schedule your service today at callrogers.com. Every time the Flames deny Rex Steiner a catch this weekend, I'm going to just start barking like his dad did on the sideline.
I hope someone gets you on film, and then maybe we see you on SportsCenter top or not top 10.
What I should do, I should wear the headgear. I should find like the old headgear that Rick Steiner used to wear. And you see me over there. Woo, woo, woo.
Somebody's got to take Lee Corso's place. So, Nick, no one finer than you.
No, he had the wrestling, like the old amateur wrestling, like the ear covers, the headgear that they used to wear.
Some serious stuff.
Or if I could find his old jacket, that'd be sweet. That's a good note to end on. Hey, appreciate you stopping by here on Double Coverage this week. For Pat Kelly, I'm Nick Pierce. Again, hit that follow button, subscribe to the Liberty Flames podcast powered by Rogers Heating and Cooling. Liberty and Jax State coming up this Saturday, 12 noon Eastern kick. 11 a.m. local time in Jacksonville, Alabama. We'll have it for you on the Liberty Flames Sports Network from Van Wagner. Our pregame coverage starts on the radio at 10:30 Eastern time. Until next time, for Pat, I'm Nick. Thanks so much for stopping by. This has been Double Coverage.
You've been listening to Double Coverage with Nick Pierce and Pat Kelly. Hit the subscribe button and listen each week to this and all podcasts on the Liberty Flames podcast channel from Van Wagner on the Liberty Flames Sports Network.